Hello, everyone. This is your host, Gemma, bringing health and wellness conversations from North Idaho and across this region. I'm so excited to chat with entrepreneurs, creatives, and believers as we journey together to connect more deeply to ourselves, our earth, and our communities. Cheers to shining bright and supporting local. Hello, everyone. This is your host, Gemma. So today I am talking with Christal Gillo of Hunting Bee Apiary. I got to meet Christal at the Inland Fest a few months ago, and she's left just such an impression on me with her knowledge and passion and excitement for her products with the bees and her soaps and her packages with the beeswax wraps. So I was so excited to reach out with her to continue this conversation and learn more about her day-to-day and what that means for our health and for the health of our planet. So welcome, Christal. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. So let's start with a little bit about your background. Have you always been into bees, or how did you get to having an apiary? And I didn't even know what that word meant until I saw your name.
Yeah, it's a bit confusing. People mispronounce it a lot, and I had to learn, and Google it, how to properly pronounce it, difference between apiary and aviary. But basically, when we were looking at relocating our family, we decided to look up here in the Pacific Northwest. And as we were looking around, ironically, we happened to see bees on the side of the road. And so I actually saw them in some of the pictures of homes we were looking at. And I told my husband, I said, just why don't we do bees? And then he went ahead and said yes. And then what ended up happening was I came up with a really creative name, which is Hunting Bee. And the reason for that is because we want to pay homage for the food that we end up eating. And so for us, hunting is a way of life and to provide for our family for natural food, living off the land. And then it was important, because the bees hunt for their food as well. So I wanted to come up with a good, clever business name. And then that kind of explains it. And then after that, what happened after that was just all of this has been my creation to be able to provide for the bees and be able to fund our apiary and expand, and then basically to educate. So
where did you come from beforehand? What was your life before apiary?
Yeah, we were northern Arizona, actually, in the high desert. And so we lived in northern Arizona most of our lives, born and raised there. And then we just always wanted a better quality of life because it took us so long to be able to get up to the woods and everything. And so we had a great opportunity to relocate and raise our children up here in the woods. And that has been just amazing.
That's awesome. So, how long have you been up here?
We are officially up here for 3 years now.
Okay, nice. And you're in Colville, right?
Yeah, we're in Colville, which is about 45 minutes from the Canadian border. So we're densely forested and just have our whole little atmosphere on the property that we're at, which is really a bit different from other people who actually live in the city.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's what more and more people are craving, even after this year of COVID. I think we're so thankful that we've been able to get outdoors still. Like, we have places we can go and be easily 20 feet away from people, never mind 6 feet away from people. So I'm sure you've been loving that this year too.
It has been amazing, especially with not feeling cooped up and everything. You can actually go out and just breathe the breath of fresh air without having to be restricted. Yeah. So that really helps a lot, especially with mental clarity and everything. And just really, helping us to get through this.
Yeah, for sure. So what does it mean to have bees? So how many do you have? Like, what does your day-to-day look like as you're keeping bees to make each of your products?
So right now, when you first get started with one of your beehives, you usually have approximately about 30,000 bees. And then that 30,000 grows into 60,000 per beehive. And so usually that's your average, is you have 1 or 2 beehives to get started with. That's what I started off with when I first got started. I then now have evolved. I have actually 15 beehives this year. I've been rescuing honeybees locally from Tooele, the neighboring city. Okay. And places like that, people call me when they have wild honeybees in their trees, and I'll come get them. Or if they're inside their home and I'm able to do it successfully, I can actually get the honeybees and relocate them onto my property. So right now I'm kind of rescuing bees and then raising them and basically splitting my own so that I can have nice Pacific Northwest overwintered honeybees that'll actually survive the elements up here.
I have so many questions. So
Yeah.
first of all, how did you even learn? Like, is this something where you like go to a class or get a book out or just start Googling?
Yeah, so ironically, I went ahead and I found a online class, which was free, and it's based out of Seattle. And so I took a 92-day online course, and they email you everything. So I did it in the winter of 17, and then in the spring of 18, I picked up my honeybees, two of them, and then I installed them myself. And then from there, it just has kind of spiraled. And every day I'm constantly learning. I'm on a ton of different forums and Facebook groups for beekeeping. There's a really good one called Women in Beekeeping on Facebook, and that's been super helpful. But right now, I actually am going to start my class this month. I'm going to go on my apprentice level. So I'm going to try to get my second level of beekeeping after this is my fourth year that we're coming up on now for beekeeping. And so I'm going to try to get my apprenticeship, but it's just a lot of learning, textbook, magazines, Googling everything.
Yeah.
And then once I find something that's successful to overwinter my bees, then I just try to duplicate everything that I can so that I'm successful in keeping them alive another year and another year.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned saving bees, but what is the nature of them? And like, do they like to find a home? And once they get to your property, it's like a cat that's like, oh, cool, I found food and a warm place to shelter. Like, I'll stay here for a while. Like, what is that? How does that
Yeah,
work?
so with honeybees, the fact that they end up going from one colony and they split off and turn into two colonies and they go elsewhere, that's a sign of a healthy colony. You want to see that happen. It's called swarming. And when they do that, they create a whole entire new queen that's on your property, and they take the old queen with them. And so the whole premise of that is for them to go ahead and thrive and to multiply and become more and more. And so whenever we see that, it's a good thing. Specifically, my whole point is to basically just go ahead and try to catch them so that they don't end up leaving my property. If they do leave, then they'll end up being feral. And at that point, because of the weather conditions out here, they don't have a high chance of survival out in the wild anymore.
Okay.
So my goal is to basically try to catch my bees or other people's bees after they've swarmed, and then you keep them on your property, and they end up loving it because you're creating a nice environment for them. We try to mimic everything that's the same in the wild, like having a nice cozy wooden home. And then we also try to feed them and take care of them, because right now with all the pesticides being used, they have a harder time of survival.
Okay.
So we try to go ahead and educate people so that it can help our bees survive.
I see. Wow. So overwintering, you've mentioned a few times, and then feeding your bees. So what do those two, does that mean exactly?
So right now, when you first get your honeybees, typically they start off with not having any honeycomb built whatsoever. So it's very important as a beekeeper to feed your bees sugar and water. And it sounds not like a good idea because a lot of people don't want to feed their bees cane sugar. But it turns out with all the scientific benefits, cane sugar actually has it's healthy for their guts. And then also the honeybees will take sugar syrup, which is sugar and water. It's the purest natural form, and they actually create beeswax with it. So that gets the bees to actually be able to create beeswax on the frames to get them started when you first start beekeeping. From there, they'll go into the springtime, and then when everything's in bloom, they'll go ahead and start filling it up with pollen and nectar and all those cells. And then they start capping all the nectar. And once it's at the perfect moisture content level, the honeybees will go ahead and cap it, and that's their honey. And then what happens that's super important is as you go through all of the season of honey season where they're actually, capping all the frames and having honey available for themselves, then as we come into the winter time and the fall time, it's important to give them raw sugar in the winter, specifically because in the Pacific Northwest, all the moisture we have has a tendency to create a lot of condensation inside the beehive. And so we use raw cane sugar on the top of our hives to aid as a moisture prevention.
Okay.
And then also worst case scenario, if your honeybees did not have a chance to be able to build up all their supplies they needed to survive the winter, there's a high possibility they could starve. And so rather than starving our honeybees, we like to have it there as an emergency feed just in case.
Yeah.
So that way, worst case scenario, if they have to eat the sugar, which is raw sugar, at least they can digest it. It helps their stomachs and keep them alive until the next spring when they can finally build up and flourish. So we've had a few beehives, specifically the one that I rescued out of a home. It was later in the season that I wanted to. And unfortunately, they started eating through their resources. And so one of those hives I am feeding at this time just on an emergency basis, because come springtime, if they have no food for their babies when the queen starts laying again, they're not going to have any way to raise the baby larvae. They're not going to be able to feed them. And then the colony themselves will end up starving to death.
Wow.
Now,
It's so
there's a
cool.
lot, yeah, there's a lot involved with overwintering. A lot of people don't realize up here specifically that, moisture it kills bees. Moisture, if the colony gets too warm inside, then they create condensation, and the condensation will drip on the bees, and cold, wet bees equals death. So right now, I thought beekeeping was a little bit, I knew it was challenging, but I thought it was a little bit easier during the winter months. But it turns out every week I still go out there, and I will go ahead and have on the top of my beehives, I'll have a crumpled up newspaper to suck up moisture. I'll go ahead and take a peek, make sure that I can hear them. And then if there's anything that I need to address, like moisture wise, I can remove the newspaper, put new stuff in. I have sacks that I made out of screen, and I fill them with pine shavings that suck up the moisture too. And so if those are full, I'm kind of wet, then I'll just remove those and put new ones in. It's basically now become almost a year-round job of trying to keep them alive. So as it's gone now, this is their third year overwintering, and I just feel like if I can keep them alive every single year with having zero colony loss, then that's a wonderful thing for me.
Yeah,
So
no,
I try to duplicate all the little fine details to keep them alive.
that is amazing. I love it. And so if they were by themselves in nature, I mean, how do they manage to stay alive over the winter then? Is it
Usually they're inside of trees. So
Oh,
most of your
okay.
times, like when we're out hunting, to be honest with you, I can smell wild hives in the wild when we're out hunting. It's really interesting. But beehives have a certain aroma. When you're constantly dealing with them, you can smell them. And it's just this natural hive smell if you're dealing with them all the time, you can smell them. So I've told my husband before that when we're out hunting, I can smell there's a hive nearby. And so usually they end up finding a hole inside of a tree, and they end up making that their home.
Okay.
And so 9 times out of 10, you'll find honeybees that have overwintered inside of huge trees, and then they'll come through fire season. You'll end up finding them later on. But the natural tree itself is the best source for them to live in. They have the perfect amount of comfortability inside of there. And then it's also for warmth during the winter. So instead of having insulation, the trees themselves are built where it's perfect for them to be able to overwinter without man's intervention.
I see. Okay.
So there is a thing though, hypothetical, if they were to swarm like on our property, they've done before, if they go up high in a tree, like say 100 feet in the tree, and they relocate themselves there and they start building wild honeycomb, those are the instances where you'll see that they don't have a survival up here because it's just too cold and wet. So they need an actual structure to live in.
I see. Okay. And
Yeah.
I know bees, like in general, I've heard that they are struggling to survive, or they're being threatened by just our changing world. And I
Yeah.
don't really fully understand that. Do you know that a little more? Can you explain
So I didn't before. A few years ago, whenever I first got started, I've been doing a lot of research. But there's a certain type of parasite that's affecting the honeybees now, and it's called the Varroa destructor. And so the Varroa destructor, they believe, has a huge bearing onto honeybees and why they're not surviving. The Varroa came over in the 80s into the United States, and what happens is they used to think that this little tiny mite, it would go ahead and feed on the honeybee, and they thought it was sucking out the honeybee's blood and making the honeybees sick. And so they would start noticing just vanishing colonies, and they were all dying around the world. Well, it turns out that the Varroa destructor actually goes ahead and sucks, it latches on the sides of honeybees underneath, and it goes ahead and sucks their fat out of their body. And so with the Varroa destructor, they suck the honeybees fat and they become skinny. So the bees end up getting skinny, and then they end up not being able to fight off different viruses that the mites end up giving them. And so one of them is called the deformed wing virus. So the mite themselves, they can only reproduce inside of a honeybee colony. So hypothetically, colony has mites, and then they'll go ahead and they go flower to flower to flower, and then other bees come in. Well, the mite will fall off onto a flower. Another whole entire bee will come by and pollinate that flower, and the mite latches onto the bee and goes to that beehive. Well, from there, the female Varroa can actually go ahead and inside the cells, she goes ahead and hides and starts feeding on baby larvae, and then she starts reproducing. So she can create males and then start having more and more Varroa inside of the beehive. So with that, that's been one of the biggest things that beekeepers face right now, besides moisture issues up here, is their colony losses due to Varroa mites. So we have found over the last few years, there was a company called Formic Pro. They're supposed to be FDA approved for use. It is the only type of miticide that goes inside the honeybee cell that can actually kill. It's like a fumigator. So you put a pad on and it fumigates inside of the hive itself. You can't have them on with honey supers. But what happens is it'll kill the mites inside of the cells, and that allows them to not reproduce. And then that can kind of stop it and slow it in its tracks.
Okay.
So that's one of them. And then another one that we use that's actually what we like is a lot easier on the bees that the mites have not become adapted to is what's called oxalic acid. So I don't know if you're familiar, but rhubarb and other types of plants, they actually create all natural oxalic acid. So if you take like a rhubarb plant and you were to break it up and tear apart the leaves will actually emit natural oxalic acid.
Oh.
So some people claim you can take rhubarb and put it in your beehives, but the oxalic acid concentration is not strong enough to kill the mites that I tried one year. What we do is we use what's called vaporization. And so the oxalic acid heats up really nice and quick. And then within 30 seconds, it just goes ahead and goes throughout the beehive. And then it disperses and it's done. The mites will end up falling off of the honeybees. And then that gives them a chance to have a survival.
Interesting.
So those are, yeah.
A few. What about pesticides? Like now that pesticides are being used even more on like flowers and on kind of their food source, is that affecting the quality or harming the bees themselves?
They do. So a lot of the people around here that we notice, because we have a lot of farmland and agriculture, use a lot of pesticides, herbicides, things like that. And so what ends up happening is it weakens the bees' immune system. So it makes them more susceptible because they're able to live, some of the honeybees are able to adapt and live with the pesticides. But when they come back from foraging, they end up bringing those pesticides on their body, which goes into the beeswax, which ends up going into their bee food for the bees. And then that ends up making them all the more susceptible to other viruses. But right now, as it's been, we have been trying to educate the public. So a big one is educating the public because a lot of people don't know necessarily all of the damaging effects to all the other pollinators, including honeybees.
Right.
A lot of people think that it's about honeybees necessarily, but you realize the bumblebee, there's one of them that has gone extinct or that is on the extinct list. There's other pollinators being affected by spraying right now. So what we do is we told all of our neighbors, look, we're going to get into beekeeping. They were all super supportive. Some of them had even tried it but failed.
Right.
And so they end up calling us before they spray. And the main reason is because if I keep telling everyone, if you can go ahead and notify your neighbors that you know have bees, call before you spray. That allows us to button up our bees for 24 hours.
Yeah.
They can go ahead and spray the pesticides or herbicides or whatever they have to do for their crops. But then 24 hours, it lessens the likelihood of our bees getting poisoned.
Yeah.
And that has really helped a ton. We recommend the public on a strong basis to, basically, if you need to spray, we understand some people are afraid of wasps, they're allergic, things like that. Your best bet is to spray first thing in the morning as early as possible or as late as possible when the pollinators are not out foraging. And that helps a ton. It gives it a chance to dry and not be as effective and harm the pollinators.
Okay, this is silly, but what are other pollinators other than bees?
So right now, I know a lot of people do not like wasps, but the wasps are great pollinators for our garden. They end up eating a lot of the other insects that eat your different types of vegetables and things like that you have problems with. We do have a bunch of carpenter bees on our property. The bumbles are one of the favorites as well. We currently have different types of fly species that are on our property. And then as it stands, I don't know all of them yet, but we have over 20,000 different varieties. There is 20,000 different varieties of these species right now in the world.
Wow.
So not just the honeybee, which is one, but there's multiples that all have these important jobs of pollinating all the products, everything that we eat, things like that. But just there's so much more to it, especially with the flowers. And one of the biggest things that really changed my way of thinking was basically we've found out that there are a lot of plants that have adapted to one certain bee species. So in order to get pollinated, that plant needs that one specific bee species. And if that one bee species becomes extinct, then that plant shall then perish and they will become extinct as well. And so it's just, the way that the world evolves in today's day and age, I mean, it's super important for people to just realize what they're doing and maybe make a little bit more conscious efforts to try to help out versus being so afraid.
Yeah, no, for sure. And educating and learning and being open
Yeah.
to it, right? Like I love just even thinking of this little buzzing world of like the flowers and the pollinators and the bees. And it's just, it's a total, I mean, of course, like ecosystem level that humans, of course, are just not always
Yeah,
thinking of, right? It's like this tiny little world. I imagine it with fairies and gnomes and
yeah, it's really
right?
true. I mean, I had a hard time, growing up with ants and things like that, being in the desert and scorpions and
Right.
tarantulas and things. And then you come up here and it's like, as you evolve as an adult and you start actually living off your land, you realize how important the ants truly are to be able to have a garden. People don't realize that the ants travel all over everything and pollinate as well. And there's different, things that they do, or, the whole thing is just amazing.
And connected and yeah,
Yeah.
so awesome.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you've got your bees and then you've got your products. So how do we go from A to B? Because I don't quite understand when you like tap into your honey, like what it takes
Yeah.
for you to get your soaps. You've got your beeswax wraps and little cute baggies that are amazing. So do you want to talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah. So one of the things is that I touched on, we need to go ahead and have the bees start creating beeswax. So that's super important. If you want to get honey and bees to be able to produce their own honey, they have to have beeswax. So once the hives are established and they've started creating their own frames full of beeswax and they go through the whole summer, if the bees have fulfilled all of their requirements for them to be able to live over the winter, which I have now figured out, and I can add what's called a honey super. And with that honey super, it's another box, and the bees can fill it up with excess honey that they want. And if they need it, I can go ahead and give that to any of the other beehives. But if there's plenty for the beekeeper, then I can go ahead and harvest some of it. So when we harvest that, you basically just take a whole entire frame of honey and you'll scrape off the top layer of wax, and that's called wax cappings.
Okay.
And so that's the wax that we end up using for our products. Then there's also a second type of wax that the bees, it's the same beeswax, but bees make what's called bird comb. So anytime that the bees have too much space in their hive, if I've forgotten a frame or there's too much space and you don't have it just perfect, the bees will fill that up with beeswax. On my Facebook page and Instagram, I've posted quite a few years now, my bees end up creating what's called bird comb. And so they start building up. And so out of any hole, they'll just start building all this beeswax, like leaning towers of Pisa for no reason. And so I'll go ahead and I have to scrape off that excess beeswax, because if not, it starts collecting in there. They'll fill it up with babies, or they'll go ahead and start having honey in there, and it becomes a sticky mess inside the hive. So I usually do a lot of hive cleaning and I scrape up all that excess beeswax. And so I use those in my products as well.
Okay.
That allows me to go ahead and process the honey, and then whatever is left out of the beeswax, we go ahead and reuse those. Sometimes I wax my frames with them for the bees to go ahead and have, or I create, I do it with my lip balm so that you have natural beeswax that's going on your body. In my lotion, I like to put it in there because topically it helps a ton with skin issues.
Yeah.
So I do use it in my lotion. The beeswax wraps are amazing. Those are one of the products that a lot of people like because you're using less plastic and you're using less saran wrap, and it's something that you can reuse numerous times. And then I even include a rewaxing pack to go along with it, so you can go ahead and rehydrate them on your own. You
Yeah.
can teach other people how to use them and make them, which is super fun. But other than that, I mean, I just try to use as much as I can of the bees products without harming them. So I don't want to take from them if
Right.
they can use it the next year. One of them that they do create is propolis, and a lot of people, it's a bee glue. The bees will go out into the wild, and so they'll go ahead and take from different trees, and they'll go ahead and start processing the sap with their saliva, and they end up making a resin solution. And so this resin is kind of like pollen on their legs. It looks really brown and sticky. And anywhere that there's any type of gaps in their beehives, the bees will go ahead and close it off to be able to create a sanitary environment inside their home. So if there's any cracks or any gaps, let's just say that mouse was to get in the beehive, the bees will kill that mouse. And then because the mouse is in there, they do not want to go ahead and risk ruining their beehive with anything. So they'll go ahead and mummify it by using the propolis. And so they'll mummify anything that's in there that shouldn't be in there so that it doesn't end up contaminating their beehive.
Wow.
So propolis is super cool. It's really sticky in the summer, but then it's really hard in the winter, and it's basically just really hard resin. So we'll go ahead and chip away at it in the springtime and in the summer when we're cleaning up, and you can save that. People use it in tincture form with pure alcohol, and you can just let it sit for weeks on end, and then you can take that as a supplement. It has many healing benefits. And then also there's companies that use it in their elderberry syrups, and it has tremendous results with keeping people from getting sick and colds and things like that.
It's been a trendy thing that I've noticed quite a bit, like propolis and then bee pollen too. Like I've seen it in different health food places, even TJ Maxx in their little
Yeah.
section. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want to, I hate getting carried away with trends until I like know the legitimacy behind it and that it's not like taking away from the animal. Like, do bees really want us to have this or do they need it? So what the bee
Yeah.
pollen too, what is that? Can you get
Well,
that?
and unfortunately, I don't prefer to take the bee pollen. So I do let people know and my customers know that we do not harvest bee pollen because we are a small apiary. If we were commercial and we had thousands of hives, which we totally support all beekeepers,
Right.
we recommend it to all of our commercial beekeepers because they have that capability. But for us, with our small geographical location, the bees need all the pollen that they can get. They go ahead and pack it into their cells and they make bee bread out of it, which is super strong, and they feed it to their young and they're able to feed it to the queen and keep her alive and things like that. So for us, it's just super important not to harvest the bee pollen. So I do keep little bits that I find on the tray. I'll take tweezers and keep them for educational purposes. I have had other times where the wax that I've harvested will have some pollen in it, and I just feed it back to the bees. So I let them take whatever they can get, and then if it's left, then we just use it for education right now. They do actually need it really, really like up here a lot. So I just don't harvest it.
I see. Interesting. And then you said processing the honey. What does that mean and what does it take? And first of all,
It's
every
a,
time you go see your bees, are you decked out in like a crazy awesome suit like I've seen in the movies or wherever?
I do occasionally. So the hat that you can see behind me, that one is one of my favorite hats. So I wanted to show you that. So I hung it up there.
That's
But
awesome.
basically it just covers me and it comes underneath my armpits. I usually wear this short or another shirt. But my girls are super gentle. And I think that's part of the reason why I am so addicted to saving the bees, because my girls, they know me, they love me. Honeybees can pixelate, and all, insects can pixelate your face. And so my bees can actually recognize that I'm their caretaker. And so with that, I usually don't have to suit up. So I do get stung occasionally here and there, and I've built up a complete tolerance to it. I don't have any reactions anymore whenever I get stung, which is great. But during the springtime, this summer, my girls are super gentle. During the winter, it's during the fall, that's the one time that I do have to suit up completely. And the main reason is because they're hitting the dearth when everything is totally done blooming and there's not a lot of food, and they're getting hungry and they're getting ready for winter. And so they're starting to prep up in the fall, because here my spring starts in May. That's when you see the flowers starting to bloom and they have food. And then my fall hits really hard at the end of September. And so during about that time's when I suit up a lot.
Gotcha.
This year, it ended up hitting at the end of August. I noticed it was 2 weeks early. And so I had to start suiting up because I wanted to check on the honey and see how was it going,
Yeah.
did you make excess or do I need to leave it for you? And at that point, that's when they were starting to become angry, and I could tell that they were being defensive over the honey supers.
I see.
So in that case, I go ahead and put on my suit. I will go ahead and pull up the frames. You have to make sure you have no bees on there when you bring them inside the home. And then you'll go ahead and take your honey frames into your home or wherever you're going to process them. We actually have a shop set up. And so in there, you go ahead and take your frame, and we do it old style. We don't have a lot of machinery. So I have an uncapping tool that I post videos on that I can uncap it. And that's the excess honey that I keep. I mean, the beeswax. There's a little bit of honey in there. And then from there, we put our frames into an extractor. And we were able to borrow our friend's electric extractor. It holds 4 frames. And so we put 4 frames inside and it spins out the honey.
Oh, interesting.
Now, from there, you would go ahead and just put the honey into whatever containers you want. You can filter it if you want. We only filter ours one time because we want to make sure there's not a lot of beeswax in there for the customers.
Okay.
And also with less filtering, it allows for there to be pollen for the customers to have inside their honey. So that's a good benefit. So we only filter the one time. Other than that, we just go ahead and jar them, and I can label them whenever and just go from there for processing purposes. Otherwise, our guards just sit around. One of the critical things is you do not want to heat up your honey whatsoever because it kills all of the good properties with honey. So it's very important that you do not heat it up. If your room is cold, sometimes, the weather's so different up here, you would just basically put a blanket, like heat blanket around your extractor, and that would allow it to keep it warm so the honey can come off of the metal, but that's it. It doesn't actually heat up the honey.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's one of the methods. A lot of times where you can get a lot of beeswax is what's called a crush and strain method, where you actually take the whole entire frame and you remove all the beeswax off of the frame, and then you crush your honey out of the beeswax and you have to let it sit there and it just drizzles all out. And then you're left with a ton more beeswax. But the problem I have that I don't prefer is that it takes away from the bees. Then I have to start over. The bees don't have as much beeswax. So with using an extractor, it slings out all the honey, and then you have a whole entire frame full of beeswax that the bees can just refill up as needed. So what's nice is when we harvested this year, I put those frames back in, and then the bees filled them right back up, which was their own honey, and then they capped it, and then they're eating on that right now through the winter.
It's just such a cool process. So I've seen different kinds of honey out there, right? There's, I don't know, wildflower, buckwheat. So what is, like, how would you get, where would that come from? Like, are those bees specifically eating buckwheat
Right.
flower? Is that right?
It's true. Some of it is true. There's a couple commercial beekeepers I have talked to, and what happens is, specifically I've heard of, is called fireweed honey. And there's certain types of fireweed on the West Coast, and they literally take their bees to the fireweed areas where their bees can forage and get pure fireweed nectar and convert that into fireweed honey, which is supposed to be amazing. Okay. So it's called chasing the fireweed. A lot of commercial beekeepers around down south, they will travel to the West Coast and they go out for the blackberries, and that's how they can label their honey blackberry, because they're literally taking them all up there to pollinate all the blackberries, all the blueberries, things like that. You can infuse your honey with different types of herbs and things like that. I haven't specifically figured any of it out to be able to claim any flavors, but I did notice that the first year we were here, I asked Front Porch, what's so different about my honey? Because they have honeybees, a beekeeper puts his bees there. And my bees will actually travel right over to their property too. Bees travel in a 5-mile radius. Okay. So if you can guarantee that your bees in a 5-mile radius have all of this, you can claim what it is. And so one year my honey was really, really light. And so they thought maybe it might be clover because there's quite a bit around. We had planted our whole entire property full of clover. You mentioned buckwheat. I purchased a bunch of seed because I want to try buckwheat, because I have another friend who the honeybees love buckwheat. Yeah. So I have tons of garden space. And so I want to put buckwheat in one section. I want to do fireweed in another, and basically just try to feed the bees. Yeah. But with the fact that the honeybees travel up to a 5-mile radius, to be honest with you, there's a lot of times where I don't see a lot of honeybees in my yard. You would think 60,000 bees, I'm getting closer to 1 million, but they're actually not in my yard because there's so much other forage. They've figured out where and what they need. They don't like one specific food. They need tons of different food. So they travel so far to get all that forage that they need to survive. So it's
not where you get all the health benefits. Like, the health benefits are from the bees eating the plants that come natural to the local area, which then when we consume it gives us, like, builds up our immunity to those plants, which
absolutely
is beautiful, right? And then you're getting all these different benefits from the diversity of the food that the bees are eating. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's exactly how it works. I mean, we have our children who have been having hay fever issues since they were born. And it's just a simple change from getting honeybees and them eating our honey in our area has really helped tremendously, where they've been able to lessen their allergy medication because they're actually consuming all of the bee properties from our actual area that was making them allergic. So that's been huge benefits. And then, of course, the bee pollen, which is in the honey, I mean, that helps out too. So we've seen it proof ourselves, and that's why for us it's a huge thing to go ahead and utilize what the honeybees are giving to us for our bodies topically. We have skin issues and eczema, and so for us with food sensitivities, the beeswax has been just a huge aid in helping our skin issues, and then the honey has helped with our allergies. But for a lot of other people, we feel like our products are helping, and that's what's important, is educating people that, look, honeybees do serve a bigger purpose. It's not just honey. but you need to care for them, love them, and they will in turn, be able to go ahead and give you what you need, which is helping your garden and all your foods and things like that.
Well, I love it seems like your theme with even creating your products is also very natural. Like you mentioned, you're not putting like scents in, you're not putting dyes in. You're like, first of all, beeswax smells amazing. Like I have candles and I'm just obsessed with that natural, like sweet smell, but it's earthy too, right? Like I don't think it needs anything. So I love that you're honing into that and not frou-frouing it up when it doesn't need it,
Yeah,
right?
I've had a couple requests here and there. There's one fragrance that's a specific premium fragrance oil. It's called Oatmeal Milk and Honey, and a lot of people do love that one.
Yeah.
So there's a couple that I do use because people do like it. But other than that, that was my whole premise, is less is more. I was originally, whenever I first moved up here, bought some paper candles, because we do live out here. The electricity was out all the time in the winter. So I bought these candles and they say beeswax candles and there's nothing to them. So I ended up doing research and found out that legally you only have to have about 5% beeswax in your products to claim beeswax candles.
Sure.
So that was really upsetting because there's no smell. And once I started like going ahead and seeing what the bees could give me and making candles, it was a night and day difference. That smell that you get, pure natural beeswax will go ahead and grab the negative ions and purify your air, and they help with a ton of things. And so after that, I just was realizing, less is more, which we're trying to lead a better lifestyle anyways. So since then, it's just kind of evolved. And I don't feel that it's helpful to put a bunch of toxins in our bodies, into the air and into our products. And so to be honest with you, having beeswax and soap just made sense to me. I mean, I make natural, least amount of ingredients with your soap. That way it's a natural, hearty soap, but then the beeswax topically helps you as well.
Yeah.
And so, I've had a couple requests and I do use occasionally the oil that they request.
Right.
But that's only in small amounts. Otherwise, essential oils, if I can, that was my big deal, is essential oils. And then if not, I still have a whole entire unscented line that I love. I mean, we go out and we cultivate sage from our property and around Washington, and we grind that up and put it in our soaps.
Oh, yeah.
And same thing. Yeah. And same thing with the lavender. I mean, there's nothing better than hearty ground up lavender, the smell of it. And then to have it inside your soap is just amazing. And it just smells so good.
Yeah, for sure. And that's it. It's not like they don't smell. They just don't, they smell natural. They smell like sweetness from the bees, from the honey, I love that so much. So what is your favorite product that you make? I love, like, honestly, the little baggies that I bought from you. I love those because I have beeswax wraps, which are super handy, but I've never seen anyone be like, well, but you can also use it instead of a Ziploc. So perfect.
Yeah, I really liked those. My grandma had actually given me an article on those the year before I started making them, and I sat on it for a bit. And I was kind of like, well, they're popular on the West Coast, they're popular in California. And then I decided to figure it out on my own, my perfect recipe that makes them mine. From there, I mean, we do a lot of leftovers and things, and my kids take their lunch to school. So for me, having a bag was more important because I could bring it home. I could wash it out really quick or rinse it, or just be able to keep reusing it. And I take them to my shows with me with my food. So that was a good one. Right now, I have to be honest with you, my favorite one is I make new bath melts. So what I do is, how you have a wax melt that you would put in your wax melt warmer. Those are not very popular because mine are more natural. And so a lot of people like the artificial smells, and they're harder to create with pure beeswax and coconut oil. It doesn't really it's not as great. So I came up with bath melts. And so those is the same concept, but it's my lotion properties mixed in with Epsom salts and then essential oils. And you pop one of them into your tub, and it just sits in there with you, and it basically liquefies, and you have this great, amazing product all over your skin. And then whenever you get out of the tub, you just dab yourself off, and you don't have to use lotion. And so for me, unfortunately, it does not contain beeswax because it does go in your tub. But it's, a line that I have off of my products, which is all natural, and those are super fun. But I have fibromyalgia, and I take a lot of baths, and for me, natural is easier. And so I like to have something that soothes the body. So I have fun with those, and those sell really well at shows and the 2 online stores that I run. So
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
awesome. And you're so easy to find online and order stuff from. So
I
everybody can
know.
go online and order.
Yeah. I really like it. I mean, Etsy's been amazing. That has been an amazing company. The website that I have has been amazing. And then just the customer response from everybody during the pandemic. I mean, that has been amazing as well. Everybody wants to help support the bees, and it's just tremendous. It allows me to be able to expand and have more bees and be able to educate better.
No, for sure. Well, and I think I was just talking to someone earlier about this. Like, we have this ability to now connect globally, right? Like, I've taken classes from Australia and I love that ability, but I also love the ability to go to like my local farmers market or Inland Fest and connect with people in my community that are like living to improve the health of our community, our bees, that I can go get a cup of coffee with when COVID
Yeah,
is over. But like,
absolutely.
connect on the very local level as well as the global level is just an awesome thing. And so now, I mean, talking on those various levels, like we can all go to the grocery store and buy honey,
Yeah.
but can you talk to us about like what to look for, like, because there's so many different labels and processing methods, and so if someone is at the store and they're like, that's where I get my honey from, is there some quality piece or label that we should be looking for to make sure that we're getting a quality product?
Right now, as far as the research I've done with honey regarding honey, is if you can buy local, buy local. That's going to be your number one source of being able to support any beekeeper, whether it's commercial, whether it's a small hobbyist, whether it's a sideliner, anybody in between. If you can find a farmer's market or you can find on a Facebook group, I mean, all you have to do is go to the classifieds, type in local honey or even honey, and you'll see a bunch of local people that are trying to sell their honey.
Oh, for
That's
sure.
going to be your freshest, best bet of natural local honey for your area. If you're at the grocery store, one of the good ones is going to be, made in the USA. The problem that we've noticed is that honey has a large black market problem. And so a lot of the honey is imported. In order to be classified as organic honey, the import honey can be called organic, but the United States ones cannot. And the reason is because if bees travel in a 5 mile radius, you cannot control where your bees go and what's sprayed with pesticides and things like that. So
Right.
unless if you physically are certified organic, there's no way of controlling your bees in a 5 mile radius. The other thing is that we try to basically look for our labels to make sure like, oh, it's produced in Texas. I mean, that's great, or some other state that we know of that is in the United States. That helps a ton.
Right.
We follow a lot of commercial beekeepers on YouTube and things like that. And that really helps us to be able to educate ourselves as to where the honey's coming from. Same with the Canadians. There's a really good company up there that has commercial, and they specifically are honey producers. And so for us, it's been a real eye opener, but you just really want to check your labels for where it's coming from, really. And don't believe necessarily in the hype of organic. There was a study done where tons of people submitted all of their honey samples, and it turns out that 45% of them failed because they were all cross-contaminated with something else. So whether that be corn syrup or something else, there was other contaminants inside of there that made it not pure honey. And so as a beekeeper, when we feed our bees, we cannot feed them during the honey season, because then they will take that and put it in with their honey. So that would make it not pure honey. So there's rules that you have to do in order to ensure that your honey is pure honey and not basically sugar syrup that you fed your bees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is fascinating. When there's so many, I mean, I think over and over and over again, as I've been talking to people, it's get to know your food sources, get to know your farmers, get to know your beekeepers, get to know your flower person. Like, that is the only way that you can really know what you're putting in your body or on your body for that matter. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah. So, how long do bees live? Like,
So
what is
right
the
now,
lifespan?
yeah, it's kind of sad, but honeybees usually typically live 6 weeks. So if you're in a state
What?
where the climates are a lot better, and let's just say that Texas is basically year round,
Okay.
Texas and California are amazing where year round the bees can go ahead and you just have a full-time beekeeping schedule, all year round. The bees, they live for 6 weeks, and then every 6 weeks they die. And then after that, new bees go through their process of all their different job duties, and then every 6 weeks. Well, the advantages to living up here in the Pacific Northwest Northwest is they don't die as sudden. So springtime, sure, summertime, sure. As it gets into the colder seasons, bees can actually live a lot longer. So it extends their lives because they're not exerting as much energy. And so they're basically just staying colder longer, and that extends their life. And so some of them, they say, can live anywhere from 6 to 9 months, depending upon what regions they're in. So right now, my bees are alive. They're inside their hives, but because it is literally 10 degrees outside, they're in
Yes.
a cluster and they're staying nice and warm. There's a certain part of time where they can actually go into torpor, which is where they actually are almost in like a comatose state where they can't move, they're not dead, but they're just kind of stuck there. And then as it starts to warm up, their bodies start to kind of move around a little bit and they can still generate and stay alive. So right now, I mean, they live quite a bit. I want to say quite a few months so far that I've noticed. During the, let's say, whenever it's about 40 degrees or so, the bees will go ahead and come out and start to go flying, and they do their cleansing flights. You'll find bees on the ground that die because that's their time.
Right.
Or option B, I found where I go out in the snow and I start picking up all these dead bees because I'm super sad and I didn't realize what was really going on. And then all of a sudden I bring them inside and have them on the counter. And the next thing you know, 10 minutes later, because it's 65 in the house, I have flying bees everywhere. And so it turns out they were in torpor. They were totally in this comatose state, just asleep, just sitting there. And then all of a sudden it's nice in here and they started flying around, going to the bathroom. And then you realize that they're still alive. So from there, yeah, so it's pretty cool process, but that's how you can tell like that the bees will live longer up here. And it's just a pretty neat.
Wow, so they're replicating that fast though too. If you have like that many bees and it's like the constant cycle
They
through.
do, yeah. So the queen herself, she will go ahead, and so a lot of people like to think that the queen runs the show for the beehives, but in actuality, they work hand in hand, but the bees actually run a lot more of the show than people believe. But what ends up happening is the queen, she ends up laying anywhere from 15 to 2,500 eggs a day. And so she'll actually go through the cells and start laying eggs all day, every day. And so that's where your reproduction comes in. And if as soon as the egg is laid, within the first 3 days, the little worker bees will go ahead and feed the eggs royal jelly. And then after that, they end up getting fed the bee bread. And then they keep growing. And from there, that's what ends up determining what's going to be a worker bee. If the bees were to determine that they want to go ahead and make a new queen, they will actually take one of those freshest eggs possible and they'll start feeding her royal jelly from then on. And they only feed a queen royal jelly her whole life. So from there, she gets lucky and she gets the royal jelly, and that'll be the queen that ends up taking over the hive. They all have different types of duties. And what's really cool is with the queen laying that many eggs per day, it's pretty neat. Inside of her body, she has all the sperm to last her lifetime from when she's gone on a mating flight. Inside of her body, she will go ahead and determine what's going to be male or female. She'll make a certain way. That'll be a worker bee or that'll be a drone, which is a boy bee. And the queen can determine that based off their needs. So right now, all my hives are full of worker bees. All the drones have been kicked out because of fall and winter, and they're dead, they're gone. And then inside of there in the springtime, she'll start laying males again for the reproductive cycles for the new virgin.
Oh, that really is very strategic of her.
Yeah.
I love it. So you mentioned too, like I know that you've got your family. How many children do you have?
I have 5. 5 that are all mine. Yeah. Yeah.
Do they love helping you with this, or is this
They
kind of
do.
Yeah.
Right now the girls are the most. The girls are the ones that really hone into it. They love the bee inspections. So I'll do a YouTube videos every once in a while. And my youngest, she loves to help with the bees. It's her passion. And so she'll walk around with the dead bees. She plays with the live ones. But yeah, she really hones in on that, and she really loves the advantages of. Basically, I've taught her, this is what you do to start a business. This is what you have to do to run a business. And she really likes the ins and outs of it because it's fun. It's like, it's just like when we were kids trying to play store and things like that, except for now it's real, it's adult life.
Yes. Oh, fun. That's amazing. So you talked about just trying to live a sustainable life in general. So what other things do you do to just kind of connect yourself more to a sustainable life? Or what does that even mean to you?
Right now, basically for us, we're still living the same way that we used to live in Arizona, which is living off the land. We didn't have good opportunities for gardens where we were at because it was northern desert and it was always either hot and wind or cold and wind. But up here, the land is rich, the land is plentiful, and the land really gives back to us. And so we've had amazing progress with our gardening, teaching ourselves, different food items that we could grow here that we couldn't grow in Arizona because of lack of water. But here, gardening has been a big one. we still love harvesting our animals because they're wild, they're natural.
Right.
With fibromyalgia, you have to eat a certain diet that's more natural. So for me, it's better to harvest meats that have not had any antibiotics or any hormones or anything.
Right.
So for us, that's a huge thing. And then also to be able to show our children what it's like to live off the land and survive.
Yeah.
So being up in the Pacific Northwest, that's been a real game changer up here, is just finding out all the different things that the planet can give you, and what you can do, even if you did live in an apartment or you did live in the city. You know, how can you grow your own vegetables inside and harvest your own herbs? And what if you want to have a couple of chickens, you know, and have your own fresh eggs, which we love doing.
Right. Well, and I think it's that piece of like health. It's coming back to like simplicity of just finding like the meat that is more simple, like hasn't got the hormones, that's from down the street or around the
Yeah.
corner. And yeah, like having just a windowsill pot of herbs. Like I'm not gonna lie, I'm really good at killing plants, but I keep trying. I'm like, my herbs last a little bit longer every summer, so I'm getting
Yes.
better.
Yes.
But just that simplifying into like, oh, you don't have to go anywhere if your herbs are on the windowsill. You don't have to go to the store. You don't have to worry about whether they've got pesticides on them because you know for yourself where you source them from. So I love
Absolutely.
that piece, just chipping away at it.
Yeah, and now with today's technology, I mean, I love watching all the videos where you can take some produce and then you can go ahead and cut off the end of it and regrow it in your home, and watch your celery grow, your pineapples, they have avocados. I mean, so many things that we can do and learn from to be able to teach everyone else as well. It doesn't have to be a cost spendly thing, you know, where you're constantly spending money on, you know, all the packaging and all the fluff that goes along with it. A lot of the big things that we do on our property is upcycling, and so I try to basically take some of the items that we have, you know, trash wise, and upcycle them and use them for our purposes, you know, repurposing for potters and plants and things like that. And
Yeah.
that helps a ton, you know, and especially when you're starting out with your garden with your egg cartons and things.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing better than trying to upcycle something and make it even better.
Yeah. Oh, I love all of that for
Everything.
sure.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I could talk to you all day long. We touched a little bit on how to find you, but your website is literally huntingbeeapiary.com, right?
I actually do have that one, but I bought a new .com because I wanted to shorten it. It's hunting and then just the letter B.com. So
Okay.
that's my newest one. Yeah. So I have that one in addition. And then of course I'm findable. Those two are the websites that at the same exact website. But that's the store that I have. It's the website I designed through GoDaddy. I do a lot of blogging on there, which helps educate other people because I want them to know that I offer free mentoring to people. I want them to succeed with their bees. And if you have questions, feel free to email me. You know, people email me a lot with questions. And then, of course, on Etsy, people find me from all around the world on Etsy, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And then I do a lot of social posting. Instagram, I'm on Instagram and Facebook under Hunting Bee Apiary, and then same with YouTube. Yeah, I a YouTube channel that I post all my videos on. So I do a lot of my inspections where you can actually see what my property looks like. What do my hives look like, and how do I do this in the forest? I mean, that's something that a lot of people don't understand, is that we're densely forested.
Yeah. No, that's awesome to actually visually see it too. Like what is the actual process of it and seeing the bees.
Yeah,
That's, oh, I'll have to check that out. Your YouTube.
it's a lot of fun. Yeah, they're a bit long, and I'm a bit long-winded. I like to talk a lot, so it's actually been perfect. So
I think that's good for passing along information. And I'm sure as you're learning and evolving, like it's so good to then turn around and teach it, right? It like solidifies it in your own mind.
yeah, one of the things I wanted to let you know is that for education purposes with teaching and everything, you know, I'm not going to be around forever. The beekeepers are not going to be around forever. And it's really important to me that I educate the children. I want the children, it's their future. They're the future of mankind. And it's like, I really want them to be educated so they understand how to care for the world for everyone else.
Yeah.
And so my favorite thing to do when this pandemic's not going on is I actually go to local schools and I educate. I'll bring my pet cemetery there and I get to show them what are poison bees, what are healthy bees, what can you do to help all the pollinators. And that has been a tremendous success, but I just love sharing with the children because it's so important for them to understand. And then maybe they can make that huge change that we're going to need, you know, to be able to keep everything going, you know.
No, for sure. And connecting the stuff that they're probably seeing at the store back to the real world. Like everything has come from a real place. And, you know, it could just be the farmer down the street or the beekeeper down the street that is connecting to your flowers and enhancing
Yeah.
your own personal community. So I love that. How
Yeah.
awesome.
There's not a lot of people that have access to 4-H clubs and things like that. I mean, up here it's a lot, there's a lot more, but from where I was from, we didn't really have a lot of that going on. But I was an 80s kid, you know, and so now it's nice to be able to explain the process. And, you know, that's why for us hunting has been to teach them this is where food comes from, you know, and you
Yeah.
can have natural cows and pigs, and our friends are raising farms where we can eat their meat, you know. It's just been a real game changer.
Well, and I think for kids, that's so exciting. Like, I'm excited. Maybe I'm just a big kid, but I'm like, I just love connecting it back to like being out there and putting your fingers in the dirt and seeing the bees and the animals and the processes. It makes it eating and
Yes,
cooking like a whole nother level of respect for the greater entity that you're bringing to nourish your own body. I just love that,
absolutely.
you know? Oh, so awesome. So I always like to end with just talking about your 3 inspirations for vibrant living ways. Like locally, are there people that have inspired you or?
That was a hard question for me because moving up here and you're surrounded by, you know, nature and everything else, you make new friends, things like that. It's so different, you know, not having family around, and you basically just learn to adapt and overcome in your situations. And for me, one of them was when we first arrived here, there's a place called Front Porch Farm, and they're located in a town that's only like 5 miles from us. And it's a little town called Addie. And so for us, we'd always drive by. But when I met them at the Twila Farmers Market and I started going my first year at the farmers market, I realized that they have these great community values of teaching people where the food comes from. They have this complete farm, and a lot of the local people will come and buy their produce, but they actually go ahead and they inspire people to eat better and do better, and they lead by example. So for me, them showing the community what it is to run a successful farm, to be an amazing family and be supportive and having, you know, new friendships, that was a big one for that company. I really support them. And then the Twila Farmers Market, that had another huge impact on my life. I've never really, I mean, I went to a couple of farmers markets in Arizona, but, you know, again, we lived in a city and it wasn't really, you know, like homesteading. And here it's like you have these amazing farmers market where the whole community comes together and you have all these small businesses, and to be able to have that warmth and that love, and everyone wants to see you successful and they want to help you and they want to understand you, it has been just tremendous. It brings the community together. All of our community from Colville and from Tooele and Kettle Falls, everywhere has been just amazing. I mean, you go to each and every city and you meet all these phenomenal people that just are also like-minded. They all just want to help each other out and basically live in this wonderful world. And so those two have been really tremendous for me and molding my future. And then also the main one that's really not even the person is the bees themselves. I mean, for me to have all these wonderful little, you know, insects looking up at me and they're telling me what they need, you know, their behaviors, their demeanors. I mean, to me, I feel like I definitely love them, but I feel personality,
Yeah.
you know, and you just seek them. And if you actually sit and you watch any of them, any kind of type of insects or animals, you can see them telling you what's going on and how to help them and make them better. And it really just has been a tremendous eye opener for me to be able to convey it to the public and to be able to help people change to be better.
Yeah.
You know, how to respect insects and how to respect the honeybees and care for them and love them, because they're trying to love us. They're trying to show us this is the change you need to make in order to make, you know, lives better. And for me, it's just been, I mean, it makes me teary because it's changed my life for the better. And I just really love them all. And they're all different. They're all unique.
Yeah.
So I don't have any favorites, but it's like, that's where my passion comes from, is just really caring for them to be able to make this better for us.
Oh, you're awesome. That's so awesome.
It's so fun.
That's so cool. Yeah. Well, and so can we find you it's the Twila Farmers Market, right?
Yeah, Tooele Farmers Market. It'll be my 3rd year going there. I'm super excited. I want to do Colville on Wednesdays, so I'm going to try that too. But it's every Friday in the Tooele Farmers Market at the park. It's this amazing park. It's got trees and a creek, and it's just such a fun family atmosphere. My kids play in the summer in the creek, and it's just wholesome. You know, it just really brings back the zest in your life.
Yeah, I love farmers markets. I chase them around the country. Like they're my favorite. Like my mom and I seem to attract them. We go through places and I'm like, there's a farmer's market. Who
Yes,
knew this? This is amazing because it's that piece of like, it shows the heart of a community and you just get to
absolutely.
connect with like the roots of it. And that's where I found all my, guests for the
That's
most
so
part.
amazing. That's so cool. I love it. I think it's the greatest thing ever. And it's just, it's a life changer, you know. That's why I enjoy going to these craft shows, is to meet all these new people and branch out to the different states and really just start meeting, different commercial beekeepers and regular hobbyists. And we're all alike. We're just trying to keep the bees alive.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Oh, I think that's such a good note to end on. Well,
Thank
did you have
you.
anything that I missed that you wanted to touch on?
I don't think so. I think that's basically everything. I could go on for hours, to be honest with you. I love my passion and I love talking to you and I love talking to everybody. And I really thank you for this. And this has been amazing. And during this, it's very cold outside, but it's nice to see a bright face and be able to
Likewise.
have a good conversation.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining Christal and me today. As you can tell, Christal is a passionate wealth of knowledge about beekeeping and honeybees, and is continuing to learn more and more and more. I love that this interview drew my consciousness to a whole subworld of life beyond the daily stresses of human existence. The bees, like many elements in nature, allow us to focus on a beautifully humming world of living and dying, growing and adapting, in pursuit of maintaining homeostasis for their family and current situation. And Christal, along with so many of my guests, has found her passion and purpose and is driving full speed ahead to share it with the world and make a difference. Sigh. It all inspires me so much and excites me so much. As I continue this journey of discovery and holistic living, I hope that you join me as I get to know more awesome, inspiring people in this Inland West region. Please feel free to share, like, and let me know who you'd like to hear in the future. Sending all the love, light, and vibrancy. Until next time.